Hi, I want to talk about some pitfalls of common marriage advice and why marriage counseling doesn't work for every couple. Okay, so I hear time and time again the secret to a healthy, thriving, long marriage is date night and communication. Okay, so if you are in a marriage where you are going through a tough time, you have a lot of resentment, stress, um, just things are tense, oftentimes that's going to spill out into date night. Not always, but most often couples end up fighting on date night when they have been fighting a lot at home. So, date night can be great. It's important to invest that time in your spouse, but it's not the be all end all to working on your marriage. And you don't necessarily have to go out to spend quality time with your spouse. Most people are able to get their kids to bed or at least have kids be in their room so you can spend quality time in the evenings, or you find what works for you in your schedule. So my husband and I spend time together every evening after our kids go to bed. Of course, sometimes we have the baby with us, but that has been good. We usually watch TV and just talk and relax, but it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just spending that quality time. But again, that wasn't always happening, in the times when we were going through harder times in our marriage. And that's okay too. It's going to depend on schedules. You don't want to force someone to spend time with you every night, but typically you don't have to go out to have quality time with your spouse. And if you do go to do something fun, try to refrain from bringing up heavy subjects, trying to air dirty laundry. You want to just focus on having fun and enjoying that time together. So, date night. Second one, communication, which ties into date night. You can't, obviously, in a relationship, you communicate. That's important. If you didn't communicate at all, and sometimes that happens, if you're having like cold spells or you're just both upset with each other, or just shutting each other out, you can feel like ships passing in the night. You can feel like roommates. So, obviously, a healthy relationship is going to involve communication. Depending on your personality types, temperaments, some couples are naturally going to talk more than others. So just because you don't have like tons and tons of communication all the time throughout the day doesn't mean you don't have a healthy marriage. But communication can backfire when you're constantly expressing every single negative thought and criticism that comes into your head. Obviously, that's not going to work out well. You probably don't appreciate if your spouse does that. So you don't have to communicate everything. I hear the advice is like communicate so you don't explode later. Well, there is another option. You can actually learn to gain control of your thoughts and your tongue and weigh whether they are true. Is this a really accurate picture of what's going on? Or are you just exhausted and letting yourself get into a negative spiral where like everything seems terrible and things seem way worse than they are? More often than not, that's the case. And you expressing that to your spouse is just going to bring both of you down. And it's most likely going to invite them to unload on you when they were trying not to as well. So you don't have to communicate everything. You can find out how to communicate better, to express your desires. You can share some frustrations, challenges you're having. You can look for him to help with problem solving. But there's ways to go about that are going to be better and bring you closer together than building walls and bringing your husband down. So communication is important, but you can't just tell someone solve it with communication because how? A lot of us don't learn the proper ways. I, for instance, thought I had to like mope and be grumpy in order to get my husband to help, and that did not inspire him at all, turns out. Of course, out of his own honor, he would help, you know, but it's much better when he's trying to be my hero. He wants me to be happy. He wants to lighten my load. He wants to show his love for me versus me being grumpy and miserable and just not fun to be around. Much easier when you can gain control of your thoughts, tongues, learn to approach things in a better way. So, date night and communication, those are the pitfalls and also how we can approach it, maybe in a slightly different and better way, which we're going to talk way more about in the next coming months. All right, so with that is couples counseling. I wish I had $1 for every time someone posted they're struggling in their marriage. on Facebook groups, and women who don't even know them said, if he's not willing to go to counseling, you should leave him. You should divorce him. He needs to go to counseling. It happens way more often than not. And unfortunately, that isn't the case. That isn't the answer. You can actually fix and heal a marriage without going to specific marriage counseling, especially if the man doesn't want to go. Oftentimes, he doesn't want to go because he knows that when he gets there, he's just going to hear all of his problems. And it's even possible sometimes counselors are biased against the man, and he's just going to feel like it's a lose lose situation for him. It can also be an excuse for couples, again, to get into that communication where they're essentially just complaining about each other. Or it can dredge up stuff from the past that maybe doesn't need to be dredged up, and you can just leave fighting more than when you came. So I've heard that a lot from friends and other people. For me and my husband went a few times, and I think my personality kind of went into it. This was probably 5, 6 years ago, before I really learned better ways of doing things. I just wanted tools, like both our personality. He didn't want to go at all, but he did. I probably forced him. Um, I just wanted the tools, and that wasn't something they could just give to me the way I wanted. Like, we wanted the tools to work on stuff ourselves. We didn't need to talk things out with someone else. That was kind of just our personality. So once I found these tools and these things that helped, I was like, yes, finally, this is what I wanted. But of course, I have to apply them. I can't just know them. So it's a learning curve, and there's some challenges, but okay. So yes, therapy doesn't always work if one spouse doesn't even want to go. Obviously, that's going to, cause some resentment, because also usually it's implied that you're the problem. We need to go to therapy. I'm basically dragging you so we can fix you. You can be told what you need to change. Um, it My experience hasn't been that women are going to therapy to figure out how to better love their husbands and fix themselves. Usually there is something you want to fix in your husband, and you want the therapist to tell them what they're doing wrong. And honestly, I did actually want the therapist to a degree to tell my husband what he was doing wrong. So yes, so we went to maybe a couple therapy sessions. I don't remember anything concrete that like made a huge difference in our marriage, but the stuff I'm going to be teaching you on here is what helped turn our marriage around. And my husband has mirrored me. He's been inspired to change. He's been working on becoming a better version of himself without me telling him what he needed to change. And honestly, like, I thought if I didn't tell him, obviously, how was he going to know? You know? But it turns out, just as I want to love him better and be a better version of myself, he did too. But it hurts when someone's constantly telling you how you're messing up versus noticing how you are succeeding and noticing what you are doing to love them. So, marriage counseling isn't the end all be all either. My husband actually told me after 1 or 2 sessions that he thought I would benefit from going by myself. And I was upset by that, but honestly, it was true because I had my own stuff and my own triggers that I needed to work through. A lot of times, counseling can involve, I think it is a lot of trying to get the man to act more like a woman. Modern approaches and what the advice that I see given by marriage therapists, and you're working against your polarity. You're working against how you are male and female. When you can harness that and you step into your femininity, let him step into his masculinity and work together, it's awesome. But when you're trying to force a man to act more like a woman, or being upset with him for not being more like a woman, for not being more emotive, not being more soft, that's obviously not going to work. And he's not going to feel loved and accepted as he is, which is super important for a man to feel accepted as he is. And when I talk more about men and their needs and just how they're wired, we're going to talk more about that. So counseling doesn't always work because you're focused on problems, you're bringing up the past, you're focusing on flaws, and then another one you usually leave with homework, and it focuses you on your spouse and what they should be doing because you know what assignment they had. So you can know if they're not doing their homework and you can call them out on that. And obviously, that is not a healthy dynamic. I'm sure there are people who go into it with the right mindset to just focus on themselves, but the temptation is hard. We're all human. It's hard not to be focused on someone else when you know what they're supposed to be doing. And you can be like, you are not appreciating me. You are not giving me my affirmations. And you tend to focus, and it actually makes you more focused on how they're failing versus how they're succeeding. Um, we recently watched the last season of The Office together, and Jim and Pam go to couples counseling, and it was cringy. And of course, I'm sure they were over dramatizing it, but it made my husband and I realize, and I was like, oh my goodness, I used to want him, to give me 3 affirmations a day because that's my love language. But I recognized how much better it is to have it be further in between, but authentic versus forced. No one wants that. It feels yucky. It doesn't feel good. But when your spouse naturally gives you an affirmation, naturally comes over to hug you versus you like it's a prescription, or homework, it's so much better. But I know it can feel hopeless and it's tempting to be like, oh, if he's not willing to work as hard as I am, what's the point? And that's not true. That's not the best mindset. There is hope, even if your husband doesn't want to go to marriage counseling. And that is exactly what we're here for. So I'm happy you're here. Happy we're going to debunk some of the myths about relationships and get into what's better ways to approach things. There is hope. And there are better ways to do things, and I'm glad you're here on this journey with me. Thanks.